1, 2, 3, 4.
Wanna hear you go.
Welcome to the AI Cafe Conversations podcast. I'm Sahar Andrade, and this is where the neuroscience of pressure meets the future of leadership. Before we begin, one thing I say every week and mean every week, everything I share comes from my experience and my opinion as a coach. It's not a diagnosis and it's not a fact about you. You decide what fits. This is the Friday of the Forbes article-like edition, the one I write in the register of a Forbes column sometimes, which means I'm going to slow down and make the argument carefully because the claim I'm about to make is easy to say and hard to prove, and it deserves the care. Here is the claim. The hardest thing about leading right now is not there is too little, it is that everything arrives faster than a leader can absorb it. The board wants an answer this quarter. A new tool lends every few weeks. The expectation is that a senior leader already has a point of view on all of it, and underneath that pace, something quite is happening to judgment. I once watched a leader sit with 4 windows open on her screen, switching between them without landing on any single one. And after 20 minutes, she closed the laptop and said she would decide tomorrow. It would be easy to call that avoidance. My read is the opposite. She had plenty of information and no room left to think. So today in the careful version, 3 things. Why the pace itself is the problem and not the workload. What that pace quietly costs at the top of an organization, and the one move that gives a leader back the thing the pace keeps taking. So let's start with the pace, which is the crisis, because it's measurable now and not only felt. In 2026, BCG found that 61% of chief executives believe their own boards are pushing artificial intelligence faster than their organizations can actually absorb it. Sit with who is saying that, not the skeptics on the team, but the CEOs themselves. The people at the very top are telling researchers that the direction from above is moving faster than the capacity below. When the top of a company feels that gap, it does not stay at the top, it travels. A board sets an AI mandate with a date attached, and that date lands on a chief executive, who hands a version of it to the leaders, who hand a version of it to their teams. At every level, the same thing repeats, which is that the demand arrives faster than the capacity to meet it well. The leader in the middle of that is expected to look calm while carrying a timeline they did not set and cannot slow down. Here is the part most people miss. The problem is not the amount of work. Leaders are used to heavy workloads and they have carried heavy workloads their whole careers. What is different now is that the work no longer pauses long enough for judgment to form. There is a new AI tool to evaluate, a vendor waiting for an answer, a team asking whether their jobs are safe, and a board asking why adoption is slow. And none of it waits till the last thing to settle before the next thing arrives. Judgment. Real judgment needs something the pace is quietly removing. It needs a gap. What I have found, both in the research and in the room, is that good decisions do not form in the middle of the sprint. They form in the small pause after the input and before the choice, when the mind gets a moment to sort what matters from what is only loud. Remove that pause, and a leader does not get sharper. They get faster and shallower at the same time. This is where a phrase people search for comes in: decision fatigue. By late afternoon, the small calls that were easy in the morning start to feel heavy, and leaders notice the drift in quality across a long run of choices. I'm careful with the science here because the popular explanation for that pattern has not held up well under testing, and I will not sell you a mechanism that researchers cannot confirm. The pattern itself is real and worth respecting. When the day never gives you a pause, the later decisions get the tired version of your judgment instead of the clear one. So the imbalance at the top is not really about volume, it's about rhythm. There is always too much yes, But the deeper trouble is that the day never opens a gap, and judgment cannot do its best work at a full sprint that never ends. Now the cost, because a pace problem that no one names does real damage over time, and most of it stays invisible until it becomes expensive. The first cost is the quality of the decisions themselves. When judgment never gets its pause, leaders start making calls in a permanent state of reaction. They answer the email in front of them instead of the question underneath it. And they approve the tool that was demoed most recently instead of the one that fits best. Reaction feels like speed, and speed feels like leadership. So the pattern gets rewarded even as the decisions quietly get worse. A leader can spend a whole quarter looking productive, clearing items off a list of pace, and only realize at the review that the few calls that actually mattered were the ones made in the smallest windows with the least room to think. The second cost lands on the team. A leader stuck on reaction and in reaction pushes that same rhythm downward, and the urgency becomes the culture. People stop bringing their best thinking because there is no room in the calendar for thinking, only for responding. And here is what I notice in those rooms. The most careful people, the ones whose judgment you must want in the conversation, go quiet first. Because careful judgment needs a pause too. And a room running on pure pace does not offer one. The third cost is the one leaders admit only in private. And it's the erosion of their own confidence. When a capable leader keeps making calls they're not proud of, they rarely blame the pace because the pace is invisible and the mirror is right there in front of them. They begin to wonder if they have lost their edge. And a leader who starts to doubt their own judgment does the most human thing in the world, which is to reach for more input to feel safe, which fills the day even more, which removes the last remaining pause, which makes the next very decision even harder to trust. So what actually helps? Not more speed and no productivity system that helps you proceed the flood faster, because a faster way to drown is still drowning. The move is to protect the pause on purpose and to decide in advance that you will not chase. Start with what you will not chase, because this is the part leaders resist most. In 2026, an Atlassian study found that 89% of executives said AI has sped up their work, while only 6% could point to real results from it. 89 to 6. Almost everyone feels faster, and almost no one can show what the speed produced. That gap is the cost of chasing everything. When a leader says yes to every AI tool, every pilot, and every new capability, the board read about it in an article, they buy the feeling of momentum and pay for it. In the judgment, they no longer have room to use. So the first practical move is subtraction. Look at the AI decisions on your desk this quarter and name the one that actually matters, the one the business truly turns on. Then give yourself permission to not chase the rest right now. Not never, just not this quarter. Choosing what you will not adopt this quarter keeps your judgment available for the decision that actually counts. And that is discipline worth protecting. The second move is to protect the pause itself and to treat it as real work, not as a luxury you earn after the real work is done. This does not require an hour of meditation. It can be 5 slow breaths before a decision. So the choice is made from a grounded state instead of a reactive one. Those 5 slow breaths give you that space, that gap, that pace. It can be a rule that you do not decide anything that matters at 4 in the afternoon at the bottom of a full day, because you already know the later calls get the tired version of your judgment. It can be one protected block a week with nothing scheduled in it. The block where the thinking that the pace keeps interrupting finally gets to happen. And the sequence matters. Get grounded first, then narrow to the decision that actually turns the business, then decide, then close the open loops. Same leader, same board, and the same relentless pace of new tools. The only thing that changed is that judgment got a chance. Judgment got its pause, its space, its gap back. And a decision made from a grounded state is almost always better than the decision made in the middle of the sprint. This is the ground of my proprietary brain framework is built on, a way of leading that steadies the leader before it ever touches the leader's strategy. Now, the honest objection, because I can hear it. Some of you are thinking, Sahar, this is a nice idea, but I do not control the pace. The board sets it. The market sets it. My competitors are moving, and if I slow down to protect some pause, I lose. I take that seriously because it's true that you do not control the pace. Here is the distinction that matters, though. You do not control the pace of what arrives, but you do control the state you meet it from. Those are two different things, and the whole argument lives in the gap between them. A leader who meets a fast, demanding board from a grounded state makes better calls than a leader who meets the same board from a reactive one. Same board, same pressure, and a different result. Because the state a leader is in is the one variable the pace cannot reach unless the leader hands it over. Protecting the pause keeps the person steering the company able to see the road, and that's worth more than the illusion of speed. And the fear that slowing down means falling behind has the causation backwards. The leaders I have watched lose ground did not lose it by pausing. They lost it by making a long string of fast reactive calls. They had to spend the next 2 quarters undoing. So here is what I want you to leave with, and then an invitation. The pace is not going to slow down. The board will keep pushing. The tools will keep coming. And the expectation that you have a point of view on all of it will keep rising. What you can build is the one thing the pace cannot take unless you let it, which is the ability to meet it all of it from a grounded state instead of a reactive one. That is not a personality some leaders are simply born with. It's a practice. And it starts with protecting the pause you have been trained to skip. If you want to work on one real decision with me, I keep a small number of 30-minute conversations open each month for exactly this. 30 minutes, no pitch, just clarity. It's free. I'm not trying to sell you anything. That's why I have a limited number of these 30 minutes. You bring the one call the pace that kept you from making well, and we spend the half hour getting underneath it together. So you leave with a clearer read on the decision and on the state you are making from it. You book one at mycalendly.com/Sahar Andrade. I'll put the note down here as well. Thank you for listening, and thank you for the care you bring to leading in a hard and fast season. Leadership does not fail. Nervous systems do. Steady before strategy. And before I leave, I like you, as I always say, show me some love. Subscribe, comment, rate, share our podcast. Thank you for your support and for making us one of the top 2% global podcasts. I appreciate your support. Thank you for being here. Until we meet next Wednesday, peace out.
1